Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're discussing the recently announced merger of CrowdOx and BackerKit, the industry's two leading pledge management service providers. Helping us better understand what this means for creators and backers alike is Chandler Copenhaver, Director of Business Development, Sales, and Partnership at CrowdOx. Chandler, welcome back to the Binge.
Hey, thanks, man. It's good to be here again.
A regular contributor, I tell you.
Hey.
I saw the announcement. I'm like, I know the guy I got to talk to.
Yeah, it's fun to be back. Yeah, we always have a good chat.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was some pretty huge news that was kind of announced this week. It actually caught me off guard. I did not see this coming at all. I guess most industries do have some consolidation, so I guess these kind of things are inevitable. But I think a lot of people were surprised. So I thought it would be great to have you kind of help us navigate just kind of what happened, what this merger means for the backers and creators alike. We have a lot of people who have joined this live. So if any of them have questions for you specifically, drop it in the chat box and we'll do our best to get to as many of them as we can. But why don't we just start by saying kind of what led to the merger? Maybe we'll start there.
Yeah. So it's a bit of it's an interesting thing, right? Because when you're a competitor, which CrowdOx and BackerKit, we've competed directly, and really that means CrowdOx, we tried to come in and really start to take market share from BackerKit. So clearly for the last couple of years, we weren't exactly friends, right? And we had all the talking points of what we thought about one another, which is mostly fabricated, right? When you don't know someone, you don't know another company, you do tend to kind of create these preconceived notions, and we certainly were in that position, right? So we're in a position of like, hey, we respect them a lot, and I'll just tell you, like, we both respected each other a lot, meaning we never spoke poorly of each other. Like, sure. They were a very respected competitor for CrowdOx and vice versa. Both were very honest in their dealings. Like, there was no real like major issues in those senses. But naturally you get that little like look across the room and like stare down kind of thing going, a little showdown. And it was real. But it was interesting, kind of a way to like, something I think about when I'm thinking about this is at Gen Con, I believe it was 2 years ago. Yeah. BackerKit team was over on one side of the room. CrowdOx team was over on the other side of the room, which was mostly me and Jackson, one of my other sales guys. And we, the whole glaring across the room thing was real. And It took us till almost the end of the convention to eventually just walk over and be like, okay, look, like, shake hands, like, let's recognize each other. Let's talk. I gave them a CrowdOx pin. They gave us a BackerKit pin, kind of broke bread together. And actually from there, like the tension was broken. And actually we realized that both sides were real people, and like, oh, they're real people. Like, so we could make friends, we could talk, we could communicate. And I think that's really kind of the genesis. I mean, that specifically wasn't the genesis, but that's kind of what has started this interaction, is like just us realizing like who they are as a company and getting to know their core values as a company, and how many parallels there were. And so that was a big aspect of it. And the other aspect is, as we really look at, I compare it a lot to what it's like to be a board game designer, right? Like when you want to create a board game and you're like, cool, I want to make this game. You don't usually recognize how much business there is outside and around the making of the game, right? Yeah. And you go out and self-publish. There's a lot that goes into that. Like, it is no easy task. And there's a heck of a lot of activities and things to do that are outside of, your skill set or your area of interest. And I think that played a small piece as a part of this as well. Like, we all really wanted to just focus on what we and hone in on what we're good at. And this is allowing all of us collectively to do so. And so, it's a really good thing. We're pretty excited about it.
So just to clarify, because I want to make sure I understand. So did BackerKit acquire CrowdOx, or was it like a swapping of shares between the two companies, or like did one acquire the other? Is that basically what happened?
Yeah, so BackerKit, we they came to us and they had some thoughts and some ideas, and we got to know them. They essentially said, let's join forces, and what that means is yes. So CrowdOx is in effective being, in a sense, purchased by the BackerKit team, but it's all of our team is joining the BackerKit team,
So even the
including
owners.
even our owners. And
Okay.
Nathan and Aaron, our two original co-founders, who are also our software developers. They're the ones that made CrowdOx and made the beautiful tool that we have. They're transitioning over to the company just like I am. I'm moving over to work with BackerKit, and as a member of the team, Nathan and Aaron are moving into running and kind of heading over all of the product, the software.
Sure.
And so we're really, the big emphasis on that is that we want to have one shared banner, which BackerKit does have a much bigger reach and reputation. In fact, to the point that when we were trying to compete, we realized like these guys kind of have like the Kleenex of like the Lego, kind of name and household name, and that was something we fought pretty hard up against. And so we're excited to kind of join as a part of that. And part of that is just letting ego down. I think just like that has been our maybe biggest hurdle, is just to like realize like it's okay, like our real objective and the same objective that they have and share in their company is to serve creators and make sure they do so in the best way possible. So we're going to be able to do that even more effectively as a combined team.
Now, as you know, recently in the industry was announced that GameFound who's a new kid on the block in terms of crowdfunding.
Never heard of them.
Pledge management software. Yeah, I'm sure. And they announced that they are doing basically they're creating their own crowdfunding platform as a kind of add-on to their pledge management. So they've used their pledge management software as kind of the entry. They've announced that they're creating this crowdfunding platform, right? So this platform is going to compete against Kickstarter. And the timing, I've heard from some people saying, this seems pretty coincidental, or is it a coincidence that this is being announced at this time, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the timing is certainly coincidental, because this has been something that CrowdOx and BackerKit have been discussing for quite a while now. It's not something brand new. And so, while the announcement of it is rather drastically new, and our speaking about it is as of this last Monday, it's kind of been a work in progress for a while. I don't think there's a lot of correlation necessarily. Certainly, there are other softwares, other tools doing similar things to what CrowdOx and BackerKit were doing. But at the end of the day, like our objective is pretty clear. It's simply to just help creators in any way possible, and that is, especially, as I'm pretty heavily invested and involved in the tabletop space of that. But for CrowdOx and BackerKit, it was, all Kickstarter, all Indiegogo, all. In fact, I could, venture to say that it wasn't just Kickstarter that we've worked with anyway. It has been just crowdfunding in general.
That was one thing I was thinking of when I saw this merger announcement as well. I thought, well, maybe they're going to take like one division will now be exclusively focused on board games, right? Has there been any discussion in that regard to kind of almost segment within your portfolio to say, look, we're going to have one team ultra focused on the board game industry, all the other non-board game Kickstarters and crowdfunding we'll put to the other team? Has there been any thought in that regard, or?
No, the actual plan is to eventually consolidate all tools into one shared tool. Because in terms of like software development, it's a huge pain to try to have to like build two things at once that are simultaneously like effective, right? You have to update both. You have to, I'm not a developer, so I don't know the details of that. I just know working kind of within the companies that it would be a massive amount of work. Internally, both of our companies already had kind of segmented a little bit. We have certain members of our teams that were focused on tabletop. There's some nuance and some kind of specifics that are really key to know in this particular aspect of the crowdfunding world, which is board games, and it's massive. I mean, there's more board games being launched than almost any other type of campaign in terms of funds raised and whatnot. So it's a pretty exciting thing for the board game industry, clearly. But yeah, we moving forward software wise, Our
Yeah.
intention is to continue to keep CrowdOx open and BackerKit open. At this point, they both run, but as a part of the shared team. We're going to continue to work with creators that we've worked with for, in some cases, many years, across many campaigns. And so the software will continue to run and function for those people. And in the meantime, our one of our sole purposes is to figure out like what people really loved about CrowdOx, about BackerKit, and how can we bring the best of both together. And so that's really our big emphasis. And so it's getting a lot of feedback, seeing what can be done. How do we tweak the software? There's a lot of work to do actually as a part of this, because we're not wanting to leave anyone in a lurch. And so really we anticipate that for this coming year, we'll still have lots of CrowdOx surveys going out. People will still see those. It's not going to stop all of a sudden. But in about a year from now, those will pretty much stop, and we're going to see, kind of what that merged tool is and how that functions, and how the pricing goes and things like that will kind of all piece together in the coming months. But for all creators, and this is just kind of more or less a shout out for anyone that is using the software and there's a little concerned about that, like, we're going to be keeping the software open for years to come, because there's lots of backers that need to be fulfilled, right? Like we're not just going to shut down and people won't be able to complete that process. So,
well, it actually makes me think, like, I know CrowdOx, one of the reasons I think that you guys grew so fast and got to that number 2 position so quickly, was that you were there for the little guy, right? A lot of these small campaigns, which may have been too small for, some of the other entities. I mean, you guys would take anybody as long as you could hit, kind of that minimal threshold coming in, and, your per backer fee. I mean, they're traded the same as a large campaign. Have you been able to bring some of that culture over to BackerKit? Are you going to see some of that kind of influence how kind of the mothership now evolves and adjusts?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a big thing that I'm personally involved with, right? Is how do we look at really helping this entire process for the creator's experience, right? One thing that's where we were successful. I don't know if it was necessarily that we were like intentionally reaching out for the little guys. And I would actually say like it sometimes was quite the opposite, that both companies are looking at, trying to make sure that we're serving all creators. But when you have to make your focus and your emphasis, clearly it's on some of these repeat creators, people that do lots of campaigns, that have successful campaigns. Both CrowdOx and BackerKit actually, made an emphasis like that. In fact, this is something a lot of people don't know. CrowdOx actually was more expensive for the little guy than BackerKit. If you look at the actual like breakdown of how pricing works, which we don't need to get into in specifics, but the basically we had to implement a minimum charge per project. And that minimum charge meant that anyone with less than 700 backers had to pay us kind of a flat upfront cost that was almost always higher for the creator, unless their game was like $100. Like it depended a little bit on the average price point, because we did a per backer fee, but without getting into like the nitty gritties, like it wasn't by intent, but it was more like, okay, we have to look at where our costs are and make sure we're not losing money every time we work with a particular project. So CrowdOx actually implemented some minimums that BackerKit has never actually had. So for the little campaigns, BackerKit actually works with probably 10 times more little projects than CrowdOx ever did. A big difference there between, maybe the approaches is that I just, and I say I because I spent a lot of time at the conventions, but our team were just really invested in working with all creators. They came to us. We wanted to help them in any and every way possible. And that it very much is, it's now been a week. I can say I've been, a BackerKit team member for a week now. And, but I already get a very strong sense of the core values of how they run their company. And I've actually been very impressed and very excited about that general approach. I do know that when you scale something quickly, it gets difficult, right? And we did the same thing with CrowdOx. They scaled much bigger and much more quickly. And so when you scale quickly, you lose certain aspects as a company. We had to be pretty nitty, or what's the word?
Hyper focused.
Yeah, and we had to kind of rough it, right? Like we had to, we got out there and tried to communicate and get to know everyone and make friends and that. And by the nature that nobody knew us, right? So we had to be a lot more integrated in that way, I think, because in BackerKit's case, like, you just knew the name. I literally have had people say to us, talking about their CrowdOx survey, they're like, when my BackerKit goes out, da 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 da. And I'm like, well, it's called, like, we're called CrowdOx. And they're like, yeah, I just thought that's what it's called, like your BackerKit. You send out your BackerKit. So anyway, it's something that I think is sort of a misconception in terms of like where the focus lies. However, I can say, though, as I was starting to point out, that when you scale a team quickly, I do know that it's very easy to start lose focus of certain things, right?
Well, you're hungrier, right? So when you're the number 2 guy, right, and you're coming into an industry, or you didn't even start off as number 2. You came into an industry that had one, massive company, and then all these little guys. And typically, when you see a situation like that in any industry, it's not price that gets you up to the next spot. It's usually customer service, right? It's an intense focus on serving the needs of your clients, because that's what's going to then foster the loyalty that you need to take you to the next level. That's what's going to foster that referral from people saying, hey, you should use this company. They're really great, man. A lot of real hands-on experience and so forth. So I think the goal is really to say, how do we not lose that, back to your point, as you start to scale up, right?
Yeah. Just to really kind of quickly point on that, because like, when you scale, you everyone had to come through myself really in order to work with CrowdOx. And so it was very easy to control how the feel was, what the approach was. And so when you have a bigger team, naturally there's going to be some changes, different personalities, different type of a thing. But what I do know is there is a joint intent and desire amongst both companies to really serve, all creators. And actually, even more importantly, in my opinion, is serve the backer really, really well. Yeah. So that the creator is happy, because the happier the backer is, the happier the creator is, happy we all are. So it's really a big emphasis for both companies.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point, right? So if a backer is unhappy, they're kind of blaming the creator. They're not necessarily blaming the pledge manager, right? They're going to blame the person who ran the actual campaign.
Correct. And that's something that they do, that BackerKit does, that CrowdOx hasn't been able to offer. We haven't been able to offer a more broad scope of backer responses, like backer service. Yep. And they actually have a bigger scaled department for that, so that they can respond to backer inquiries and kind of support the creator in that. That's something that we did do, but it was like case by case, and it's something we had to charge more for. So that's actually something that we're pretty excited to be able to open up more.
So there are some questions here in the lobby. One was from Mike Bruner, was saying, what was the feeling like when Anakin switches to the dark side? Is that how it kind of felt when you joined the team?
Am I Anakin in this story? Yeah, I mean, if you look at it that way, I guess.
Was the Imperial March playing in the background when you got the call? Yeah. No, but seriously, when you have an industry like this, where you have really kind of 3 key players, now 4th one, obviously, with GameFound quickly gaining steam. But I believe BackerKit and CrowdOx were the only 2, I think, that had Backend, at least a while back, Backend access to the Kickstarter actual platform. Is that still the case?
Maybe describe a little bit more what you mean, like actual
actual
integrations with the Kickstarter.
Yeah, with the Kickstarter platform, right? Because there's different layers, and I think that you have to kind of be approved as a kind of official.
Yeah, there's different approaches of how that's done, but both systems did have kind of these deeper integrations, and I'm not aware of the others having those integrations. This was in part because we both, CrowdOx and BackerKit, both had a really strong relationship with Kickstarter. Yeah. A lot of people are like, well, they think that, some people think that what we do is like kind of, counter against what they're doing. And that's not necessarily the case. We're not really worried about one way or another. What we're worried about is like, what does that creator need and what can we do to help that? So And at the end of the day, that's going to be our continued focus. And what we're excited about with our shared resources and, bigger team. I mean, CrowdOx went from a team of like 8 to 12 people, if you think of some contractors and stuff, to, a shared company now of like 50 people. And so it actually gives us a lot of resources to help in ways we couldn't help before. We were always enamored by and very jealous of the BackerKit marketing programs that they'd put together. Sure. Some of the ways that they can help creators that we just couldn't. And so now to be able to, also offer that to creators is something we're excited about.
So usually in an industry where you have, three primary players,
Yeah.
and two of those three merge, like typically less competition in industry is not necessarily great for the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to the, the creators out there that may be concerned about that, to say, gosh, I had, a few options here. Now I have a lot less options, right? With the two largest now merging. What would you say to them to kind of keep them, their confidence that everything's going to be okay?
Yeah. At the end of the day, so as a shared company, we're going to be able to provide more value across the board, more value than BackerKit could alone and that CrowdOx could alone, right? Mm-hmm. That by itself is something we're excited about. There's things that are in the future that we're really going to be working hard towards to do. Mm-hmm. And so the amount of value that's produced is simply going to increase. I think maybe it's like comparable, maybe that's not even a good comparison, but I often compared CrowdOx sometimes to like Google, for example. Like right. Google had a really clean interface, and in the same way, a lot of like tech things do merge together. It's kind of a natural part of that progression sometimes. It's just the use of resources, and CrowdOx. I mean, most people don't know. Like we've been grinding for years, and it as far as our team is concerned, we were at our limit, and we're doing really good. CrowdOx had a great year. BackerKit had a great year. It's been really a busy year for both companies. So it's more on not a necessity, but more of like, where do we want to go as we go along, and what are our real like objectives? And so I'm excited that like I get to reduce down certain like aspects of my workload to really key in on what I'm good at, and as well as like how I can best help creators. Like interactions with creators is somewhere that I focus on and try to do a lot of, but I can only do so much of when I'm really, up to my eyes in certain types of activities. So, and I think it's the same for our software team and, everyone else. Like they get to really key in on the best way they can help.
So certainly with a larger team and people integrating over, and I see there's a question in the lobby here. Just someone was asking if there was any downsizing, or was there more kind of opportunities to even bring more staff in with this merger? From what I'm hearing you say is there was no downsizing. The two teams came together, right?
Yep. So our entire team is moving over. If you've been using CrowdOx, you're going to work with the same people, and I'm still there. A lot of our customer service team is still there. Our development team. BackerKit in general is still hiring. If you look at their careers page on the website, in fact, it just came up in a company meeting today. And so there's still opportunities with that. As the company grows, that we'll be able to do more and more. And I think the marketing service, the launch program, which the launch program is pretty cool, but all of those things, just expanding our capacity to help more in different areas, right? And that's kind of to answer your other question a little bit even more detail. Like competition, elimination of competition is competition's healthy. Like we talked about, that's what got CrowdOx to where it was, and there's a healthy element to that, and it won't go away. We're not anticipating there to be, or it's we're not the only player, and we're not the only ones considering these needs. But what we can do now for other needs that stand in the front and in the back of the crowdfunding experience, there's a lot that goes on before you even launch that campaign. That is a lot of work. And so we've already started to help in that area. There's a lot of things that happen after the fact when you're fulfilling, or even when you're later on needing to sell product that you have excess of, right? Like there's a lot of like specific things that we can help with that in the coming years.
Is there anything specifically that BackerKit has, other than the people and obviously the client base that you guys brought with you? Is there anything that they're going to now adopt into their system? Like, is there any of the software or any of the tools that you guys were using that is something they weren't necessarily doing that they're now going to adapt to help make kind of the overall, merged offering that much better?
Yeah, definitely. But I don't know what. And that's because it's a determination based on one, like I was saying, the kind of the feedback that we get. And two, we need to also assess like what's logical. Do we keep this and have this fit in here? Like there's a lot of aspects that we know on a feature set as well as the user experience, both of which are going to be really clearly looked at. If there are any, people that we've worked with that are listening and would have feedback, any and all of that is something that we're really, looking for right now.
We've got Philip in the lobby just asking if you can tell us a little bit more about the objectives after the merge. So you kind of alluded to some objectives you guys are targeting. What are some of those things that you guys kind of have, kind of your top 3 things you guys want to
Yeah,
get?
one of the first things we just need to, I mean, first off, it's just stabilization. We need to kind of, when this kind of a change happens, it's a big deal to our entire company and to their company. And it's, a lot of new processes are in place. So a lot of it's internal objectives, right? A lot of it is, there's some external objectives, like, making sure, like a big thing that I'm focused on right now, like 100% of my day to day is interacting and communicating with all of the people that I've worked with. And there's a lot of people I haven't talked to yet that I'm like, man, I just need to chat with them. Like, I want to make sure people don't feel afraid or concerned, because that's a natural reaction to this kind of a thing. Everything is remaining the same, and for a good amount of time too. It's not changing on a dime. And so that's something I'm trying to get across really well.
Transition is always easier than just flicking a switch, right? You just try to flick a switch. That's when you lose people. And I think everybody's got experience with this. Facebook, one example of that. They just cram through a change and everyone's just pulling their hair out. So it's good if you can it sounds like you guys are going to make this a very soft kind of transition from kind of the way you're doing things at CrowdOx over to BackerKit. What are some of the immediate changes you're going to see? So for instance, we noticed, if I go on the CrowdOx website, right, there's the price page, which has changed, right? Now it says call for a quote, which I think is one of the things that used to be also on the BackerKit site. Are you guys switching immediately over to the BackerKit pricing, or is there like a transitionary period there as well? Or how is that going to work?
Yeah, we want to talk to people, one, because it's not, we are trying to transition a little bit to a joint pricing. So as far as pricing is concerned, a couple of months from now, there will be an announcement that will give like what we're planning to do. We needed to get the whole team together and talk it out, right? Because we do want to rationalize the pricing as much as we can. It's why people liked the CrowdOx pricing, is it's like, okay, it's rationalized. I know that it's this per this, and there's kind of some connection there. And so we do know that there's some changes we need to and want to make in that area. I can't say that it's necessarily going to be as aggressively affordable or as cheap as maybe we made it when we were competing. And mostly it's because we had a small team that was 100% remote, right? Like we now are a much larger shared team, but it doesn't mean that is going to spread a cost on everyone either. It's not going to be enormously more expensive. And so we want everyone to feel confident, comfortable in the fact that no change is happening rapidly. And as we kind of get to those gradual steps, like we're going to continue to communicate that really well.
So one of the questions I had when I was kind of thinking of this merge as well is I was wondering if any of the CrowdOx identity is going to continue on kind of like a year from now when you guys do the final kind of, harmonizing of everything. Is there any of those branding elements that BackerKit plans to kind of adopt, or is it just going to kind of get jettisoned and then they'll take kind of the best of the CrowdOx world, but it'll just fall under kind of the BackerKit brand?
Yeah, it definitely is all under the BackerKit banner, but that doesn't mean that the CrowdOx portion, this is all opinion. Like there's no discussion on this yet because we're still figuring a lot of things out. But my opinion is it'd be cool to keep the Ox around, right? And have the Ox,
climbing up the hill, maybe
associated. Yeah, I've seen a couple like I've already seen some like fan art of that. But we definitely want to, it'd be fun to retain some aspects of that. And what's kind of cool about this whole thing is like both CrowdOx and BackerKit, like I said, there's parallel and there's a lot of shared things. Both companies were actually started by two people. Both companies have two co-founders, and both of them started out because they both ran a Kickstarter, right? CrowdOx and BackerKit, the origin or the genesis was like they made a Kickstarter. It was really hard, realized there was a huge pain point, went after to figure out how to solve it. And so that whole like there's a lot of pride and emotion attached to those stories and that genesis. And so I do think that we will see some retention of that in the long haul.
One thing that I was wondering if you guys are worried about. So on one hand, you got the high fives, right? It was like, okay, we're one big family. Let's get the big family hug going here. We're all one big team. But how quickly kind of do you look now to the sidelines and say, okay, did we just leave a hole that now someone else is going to jump in and start filling? Like if we just created our next big competitor as a result of this merge, right? Because you often see that, it's
Yeah,
almost
for sure.
any industry. It's like an infinity symbol, right? You see consolidation, and then based on consolidation, a bunch of little small guys spring up, they get bigger, 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 eventually get consolidated, and it kind of swings back around.
Yeah.
Is that something you guys discuss, or is that something you've got your eye on, or?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, we kind of anticipate and welcome that in a sense, right? Like, of course, we're not hoping that we get some big competitors, but it's the same reason why this all happened. Like, we know that 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 it's a healthy thing. It's going to keep us just as scrappy and as aggressive at trying to make sure that we're not being we're not being dumb. Was what I was going to say, but that's not very eloquent. That we're being as
blind.
best as we can be.
You're not being
blind
right?
is a good word.
Yeah.
Like, we just really want to be working hard and not getting lazy, right? That's, I think, the big thing is it's easy to get content or lazy, and we definitely don't want that to happen.
Any plans to do your own? And I know this is kind of, there's probably no answers, but I'm going to ask it anyways, because I know people have asked me. Can you see BackerKit eventually doing what GameFound has done and go and create their own crowdfunding platform as well?
It's not even like something that we're actively thinking about, because it doesn't. Our only objective, and what we wake up and talk about, both teams did before merging and after merging, is like, where are we offering value to the creators that run campaigns? And we are both very much connected to this Kickstarter ecosystem, as all of us are, right? The people that are making especially in the board game industry, like, Kickstarter is and has been something that has actually created this small micro economy, what's the word?
Ecosystem.
Ecosystem. That's the word. Like, it doesn't exist in the same way that it would without Kickstarter. And so, not to say we know what's going to happen as we move forward, but we do know that it's always going to be to focus on how can we serve, the creators at the forefront.
Fair enough. I got one last one here from Rob McBride. So I think it's more of a suggestion, but he was saying that the biggest difficulty for him is with creators having to swallow the 5% on the cost for shipping. So I guess right now it's kind of 5% off of like all funds collected. And I guess he's wondering, has there been any discussions on maybe looking at how that model is going to break it going forward? I mean, one assumption is you guys will just adopt BackerKit's model. Another thing that could happen is you guys could look at your entire pricing model as a whole and try to look for ways to improve it for everyone, right?
And that's the goal. What we're doing is trying to look at both of them. There's merits to both approaches, and to figure out, what parts we should keep and which parts, we can get rid of. And that's what's kind of exciting, because actually, there is a misconception that CrowdOx is always, that CrowdOx is the cheap option. It's not necessarily the case. Like I said, we just could afford to be more aggressive than everyone else in terms of our pricing. We were a small team, all 100% remote. Right now, everybody's remote in BackerKit because of COVID. Thank you very much. But but with a bigger team and stuff, you can't be, cutting costs as much as we did. And we did that. It was as an investment too. Like, we probably lost money on a number of projects. Like, it wasn't a situation where we're just like hauling in the dough. It's a scenario where we were investing in our future growth. And so we knew to get our name out there, we gotta work with some of these awesome campaigns, these awesome creators. That way that reputation continues to, have momentum. And so as far as pricing goes, I don't want anyone to be overly concerned about that, because we're going to try to take care of everyone and come up with pricing model that is something that everyone gets excited about. And to add the cherry on top, like I mentioned before, like, if we can bring more backers to campaigns as a part of the promotional efforts, like that was a big emphasis that we're going to be pushing forward.
So if anybody has any questions that they want to send afterwards, or they're looking for some clarity, or maybe some things they've thought of where they're just saying, hey, how's this going to impact this or that?
Yeah.
How best do they reach out to you, or where do they go for that information?
So I am personally, I absolutely love the direct interactions. So a Facebook message, you shoot me a quick message, Facebook, as well as email. Email is just fine, but the Facebook sometimes is nice. We get to actually like have a chat. But you can send an email as well to Chandler@crowdox.com or Chandler@BackerKit.com. I've got both now. it's a lot of fun to have 2 email inboxes. But yeah, open to hear from anyone to answer those questions, because there's a lot of specifics, and I know there's concerns. Like I said,
Yeah.
I know that people are concerned, especially if they've been using CrowdOx for 6 years, and they've done all these campaigns. I mean, we're very much aware of those people and doing our best to try to communicate with them. So if they reach out to me, it makes it a lot quicker for me to get a hold of them and help with those concerns.
I appreciate that. Well, Chandler, you've always been a very open to communication with me. So I can say from my end, you're a great avenue in terms of just getting answers, and answers, quite frankly, quickly. So I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you, quite frankly, for the transparency you even showed in this talk. I know some of these questions were not necessarily easy questions, but I think they're questions people had, and I really appreciate your honesty and, quite frankly, in answering those. So I want to wish you all the best in this new role, and with this it was this kind of marriage of the two companies, and I'm sure it's just some amazing things coming forward. Thanks again for coming on this podcast. I really appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Thanks.
All right, you take care. Cheers.
Yeah, you too. See ya.
This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply join the Facebook group Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.